They called it Blackgate Inferno, the place where hope went to die. Perched on a craggy rock formation miles off the coast, surrounded by violent seas and razor-sharp cliffs, the prison looked more like a medieval fortress than a correctional facility. Built half above ground and half below, its lowest levels were said to be carved directly into the rock bed, a labyrinth of steel, stone, and screams. No one had ever escaped, no one had ever even tried, because Blackgate Inferno wasn't just escape-proof, it was soul-proof. Armed drones circled the skies, scanning every inch of the structure 24 hours a day. Inside, motion-detecting floors, facial recognition scanners, and AI-controlled lockdown protocols monitored every breath, every blink. Guards didn't walk the halls like they did in normal prisons. They watched from behind bulletproof glass, hundreds of feet away, letting machines enforce obedience. The walls were thick, cold, and scarred with failed uprisings. Most of the inmates who landed in Blackgate were either too powerful or too dangerous to be held anywhere else. But one prisoner stood out from the rest, Raheel Cobra. He was held in cell A01, the deepest, most isolated chamber in the prison. A solitary pod surrounded by electric barriers and 10 layers of fail-safes, it had no windows and no human contact. Every meal was delivered through a sealed, timed chute. Every communication was one way. There were no rights, no calls, no mercy. Raheel had earned that fate. Once a celebrated military strategist and special forces commander, Raheel was the kind of mind governments trusted to win wars and end revolutions. Fluent in 6 languages, a master of terrain warfare and psychological operations, his name was once whispered with admiration. But something changed. After a secret mission in Eastern Europe went catastrophically wrong, details still classified, Raheel vanished. When he resurfaced 2 years later, he was no longer a patriot. He was a mercenary leader with a cult-like following, orchestrating black market arms deals, cyber attacks, and insurgencies across 3 continents. Cities burned under his command. Regimes toppled. Whole nations destabilized in weeks. He wasn't a soldier anymore. He was a one-man war. It took a coalition of international forces, drones, spies, and a 6-month pursuit to finally bring him down. Even then, 24 men died just trying to capture him alive. The world breathed a sigh of relief when he was finally caged. And so he was sent where no one else could reach him, Blackgate Inferno. But Raheel Cobra didn't scream like the others when he entered the prison. He didn't bargain or protest or shout threats at the guards. He simply smiled, calm, collected, as if he'd planned this all along. The wardens monitored him with obsessive paranoia. They reviewed every second of his surveillance. They studied his vital signs, searched his cell weekly, interrogated any staff who came within 10 feet of his pod. For 5 years, nothing happened. Raheel barely moved. He ate, slept, and stared at the walls, until the night of the Black Sun. A freak solar flare knocked out power across the northern hemisphere for exactly 17 seconds. Emergency systems kicked in, except in Blackgate's sublevels, where the backup generators failed due to a fault no one had ever noticed. When the lights came back on, cell A01 was empty. No signs of forced entry, no breached walls, no body, only a single sentence scratched into the concrete floor with what appeared to be a fingernail. "You built a prison for men, but I am not just a man." And Raheel Cobra was gone. The hellish prison had finally failed. Raheel Cobra never rushed anything. He studied patterns, people, and systems with the same cold precision he once applied to battlefield maps. Even in a place like Blackgate Inferno, where chaos ruled and trust meant death, Raheel began sowing the seeds of escape the moment he arrived. He observed every detail. Which guards looked bored, which inmates whispered too often, when the drones rotated, when the cameras blinked. He noticed that the food delivery chute to Cell Block D often jammed. Someone on the inside wasn't doing their job. That was Raheel's first opening. Using a code tapped through his cell wall, a dead language only a former intelligence operative would recognize, he reached out to Samael, a disgraced hacker imprisoned for turning nuclear launch codes into an NFT stunt. Then came Vico. an ex-cartel tunnel engineer who'd been burying secrets under concrete since he was 16. Rahil didn't recruit followers, he recruited assets. He promised them freedom, but only if they followed every instruction with military precision. They did. Because when Rahil spoke, you didn't hear desperation. You heard certainty. Getting to the guards was trickier, but every system, no matter how advanced, had one fatal flaw: people. Rahil learned that Officer Garin, a mid-tier night warden, was drowning in gambling debt, and Nurse Patel in the medical wing had a daughter with a rare illness and no insurance. Both had reasons to look the other way, for a price. Over the course of months, Rahil orchestrated a slow, deliberate manipulation. Garin rerouted surveillance feeds once every full moon, just a few seconds at a time. Patel slipped coded pills to the inmates carrying out the physical labor for the tunnel, disguising tools as medical supplies. The tunnel itself was a monster, carved out 1 inch at a time from beneath the isolation chambers. Vico used a homemade slurry of acid, soap, and copper wiring to dissolve concrete without triggering seismic alarms. Samael created fake data packets to mask the temperature fluctuations from motion sensors. And then came the perfect storm, literally. Astronomers warned of a powerful Class X solar flare, expected to interfere with satellite communications and power grids. Blackgate's officials dismissed the warning. The prison ran on triple redundancies, they boasted. But they didn't know Rahil had bribed a prison tech weeks earlier to disable one of those backups, quietly, surgically, logged under maintenance. On the night of the Black Sun, at exactly 3:17 a.m., the solar flare struck. The prison plunged into darkness. Electric barriers dropped. AI control systems shut down. Cameras went blind for 17 seconds. And 17 seconds was all Rahil needed. In the chaos, a staged riot broke out in Cell Block D. Fires were lit. Screams echoed. Guards panicked. All attention was pulled upward while Rahil, Samael, and Vico vanished into the tunnel. But when the lights came back on, Rahil's cell wasn't just empty. It looked occupied. A charred, unidentifiable corpse lay in the center of the room, slumped in a kneeling position, its wrists bruised and throat slit. DNA tests would later confirm the tissue matched Rahil Cobra. The prison warden sighed with relief. "Hell holds," he muttered. He had no idea the corpse had been stolen from the morgue 6 days prior, a John Doe. Samael had reprogrammed the biometric scanners. The cameras showed Rahil still in his cell, unmoving, until the flare wiped the feed. 2 weeks later, somewhere in the Peruvian highlands, a security drone captured a blurry figure in the distance. Broad-shouldered, silent, smiling, and tattooed on the back of his neck was a cobra, coiled, ready to strike again. Rahil Cobra was free, and the world didn't know it yet. The morning after the Black Sun incident, panic swept through the world's highest levels of power. By noon, the news broke. Rahil Cobra, the world's most dangerous strategist and mercenary, had escaped from Blackgate Inferno, the prison that was supposed to be escape-proof. Governments denied it at first. They clung to the DNA match found on the body in Rahil's cell. "It's conclusive," a spokesperson for the Global Security Council insisted. "Rahil Cobra is dead." But not everyone believed it. Interpol's cyber division flagged an unusual encryption signature in an intercepted message between 2 criminal syndicates in Singapore and Moscow. The message read, "The cobra sheds its skin. It breathes again." Then came whispers. An arms depot in Algeria burned to the ground under mysterious circumstances. A former general under Rahil's old unit disappeared from a military base in Romania. A coded manifesto appeared on the dark web, unsigned but unmistakably in Rahil's writing style, short, surgical, prophetic. It said simply, "The fire doesn't die. It waits." The global manhunt was reactivated under the codename Operation Viperfall. More than 40 intelligence agencies pooled resources. Every known associate of Rahil was interrogated, every border checkpoint reinforced. But he had become a phantom, a ghost without a footprint. In the chaos, Warden Nix, the head of Blackgate Inferno, resigned in disgrace. Surveillance logs showed clear signs of long-term manipulation and internal corruption. 2 guards were found dead, one by suspected suicide, the other poisoned. The tunnel had collapsed behind Raheel. Every trace of his escape was buried under concrete and molten steel. He had erased his path so thoroughly, it was as if he had simply ceased to exist. But Raheel hadn't vanished. He had evolved. Somewhere in the eastern Himalayas. At the edge of the world, nestled among wind-chiseled cliffs and snow-covered trails, sat a quiet Tibetan village untouched by time. No roads led in, no satellites peered down. The locals knew only the rhythm of the seasons and the silence of the mountains. In a small wooden home above the village monastery, an old man lived alone. He wore monk's robes, spoke little, and limped as though he had been through more winters than most. His name was said to be Tenzin. He prayed daily, worked the land with the villagers, and read ancient texts with a serene gaze. But this man was not Tenzin. At night, after the candles dimmed and the winds howled across the peaks, he removed the mask of age. Contact lenses slipped out, a bald cap peeled away. He stood upright, his back no longer bent. A jagged scar on his shoulder glinted under the moonlight. Raheel Cobra, alive, watching, waiting. The small house hid more than books and tea. Beneath the floorboards lay schematics, encrypted laptops, and maps riddled with red circles, cities, power stations, government facilities. A corkboard hung behind a concealed panel, pinned with photos of former enemies, allies, and targets. Strings connected them like spiderwebs. He wasn't hiding, he was planning. Each morning, he greeted the villagers with a peaceful smile. They saw a man who had found his place in the quiet, but behind those eyes burned the same mind that once brought nations to their knees. Raheel didn't just escape from Blackgate. He hijacked their certainty, made the world believe the nightmare was over, when in truth, it was just beginning. As the sun set behind the snow-capped peaks, Raheel stared into the horizon, and with a whisper, almost to himself, he said, "They built hell to hold me. Now, I will build hell for them." Tagline: he escaped hell, and now he's bringing it with him.